It's something that it provides out of the box. You don't have to configure it. A lot of things could go wrong while transferring data.
Can you predict before you press that run job whether you're going to egress £1 million worth of stuff?
Oh, my knees are... It's quite a good punishment. Batch operations is AWS's attempt to improve and remove that pain. So you can filter based on the name. The demo would show you how batch operation fails. That's part of a demo.
Absolutely fascinating talk.
Like and subscribe for next one.
Over to Victor. Thank you very much.
Today, my own talk is centered around a specific feature within a product, and that's batch operations. We all know S3. S3 has been around for over a decade now. It was one of the first features that AWS launched, so it's been around for quite a long time. But what I'll be speaking about today is on batch operations. What does it do? How does it help? Things like that. But before I go into batch operations, let us start from the beginning. What gave me the inspiration for this talk? Last year, this was me over here, and this was my project manager at work. Quite funny, but I was that terrified. And I'll tell you why. Because of this, data transfer. It's a source of pain for everyone, for engineers and for end users, those who use your product and those who build those products. If I were to ask everyone in this room here who has had a mobile device, they'll tell you that one of the reasons why they don't adopt a new mobile device when it comes out is because they're worried about how they move their data from the old device to the new device. The same thing happens too for companies, especially the large ones. When there's a new engineering product or software coming out, one of the first concerns they have is, how do we move our existing data from the old software to the new one? So data transfer is a source of pain because a lot of things could go wrong while transferring data. We could have security issues coming up, leaking sensitive credentials of your users. We can have loss of data integrity, moving from one platform to the other. So it's a pain, a total pain. If you've been in the engineering side of things, you would know that whenever a topic comes up about moving data, it's something they shy away from. The engineers in here can relate to that. I had a recent experience, and that was when I was asked to take over a large product for a building management software. Now, we had this software built around a CMS platform. CMS is our content management software. So being a building product, we had editors and other people, non-technical people on the team who were creating content for the building. Content like guides, directions within the buildings for those who reside in those buildings. Now, I had to take it over. And one of the major issues we had was this. We had media files stored in the CMS asset library. So we had files such as PDFs, we had brochures, we had images, we had videos, we had web pages, all within the CMS asset library. Now, the problem was we were shifting products. We were moving from one CMS to another CMS. Now, how do we get those files out? It became impossible, literally. We tried several hackarounds to move these assets, but they were all unsuccessful. We tried writing bash scripts that would pull the images and upload them. They were all failing. One of the reasons why was because of the way the APIs are being designed. So we have APIs that are expected to be short used. So you can't have a single connection on an API for a very long time. If you try to copy large files of about 100 megabytes, 50 megabytes, it would break in between because you're working with buffer data and the rest of those. Now, the last option, which eventually worked, was manually downloading these files one by one and re-uploading them into a Google Drive bucket, Google Drive folder, before moving to our new software. Now, this was a pain. It took us over a full week. Imagine spending 5 days engineering time, billable hours, downloading files, re-uploading them. We had over 1,000 files because this was a very large building software that had been running for about 3 years, and we had to do all of this. And that's what gave me the inspiration for this talk, because it was of recent I learned about batch operations, and this was something that could have helped us a lot. Oops, wrong move, good move. All right, so before we go forward to what batch operations is, let's have a quick introduction to who I am. My name is Victory, very nice name. I became victorious over the problem. I work for a company called Converter, which is a Swedish-based firm, but I work here from London. And over the past 6 years, I've worked for several companies across the United States, from Texas to San Francisco. When I'm not working, I'm one of the community builders at AWS, and I've been there for the past 2 years on the Dev Tools category. So I get to work with tools from AWS. We get to do beta tests on them, creating content on them. And I'm also a community guy. I get to work for these companies, DigitalOcean, Okta, LogRocket, and a bunch of them, writing documentations and tutorials for them. This is a recent picture at the State of Open Source conference at the brewery here in London, where I got to volunteer and contribute to the overall event. So now let's go deep into what batch operations is. And this is how they describe it on the AWS documentation. So it's basically a tool for managing tens to billions of objects at a large scale with a few clicks or single API requests. Now I had those quoted because I'll come back to explain them. And some of the features it does is it gives you the ability to copy objects across buckets and regions, tag objects, change objects, ACLs, or storage classes. We've got a lot of technical terms in here, and I'll come back to explain them. This is how I understand, and also explain what batch operations is. It improves the developer experience from object management. Now, notice I have improves underlined here, because batch operations does not do anything that's new. What all it does, you can do that on your own with S3, but it improves that process to have a better developer experience. Now, later on in this talk, I'm going to explain what developer experience is, because it's one of the highlights of this talk. Remember when I started, I said data transfer is a source of pain. Now, batch operations is AWS's attempt to improve and remove that pain which developers have to go through when they need to move their data around. So just to keep everyone on the same page here, I know not everyone here is on the technical side, so just to explain what things are, I've got a couple of concepts here that you'll hear me mention repeatedly. One of them is objects. So objects refers to your files on S3. Files could be PDF files, your photos, your videos, your static pages. They're all called objects. And buckets, just like the literal meaning, your buckets where you put something in. It's like a container containing the objects. So within a bucket, you have several objects in them, and all of those. Then access control list has to do with who can access your buckets, accessing the objects in those buckets. While simple storage service, S3, that's AWS's way of naming things, has to do with the service that provides the objects and all of those. Now, just keep that in mind. So why perform batch operations? You might ask yourself, when you set this up, you don't need to change it again. It's just going to be there for the whole lifetime of the product. Well, change is constant. We all know that. There are various reasons why you have to make a change. And this is not just in life in general. Even in engineering, changes always happen. There are always various circumstances that pop up that requires changes. Some of the potential changes in engineering has to do with change in AWS accounts. As a company grows, most times they have to split accounts, have multiple sub-accounts within a single parent organization. So you could have a scenario whereby within your AWS organization, you now have a new account just for engineering, while you have a new one for financial side. Now you have to move your files again from the parent one to the new one. Now, if there was no batch operations, you would have that same problem I described. That's having to move those files. Another one has to do with engineering conventions, how files are named. When you store those files, most companies have the way they name their files. Sometimes the naming can be tied to the specific user, who the user is, what they can do, and all of those. Those could change over time. Then you can have selective change in storage region. Now, I had selective in quotes there because sometimes This change is not global. So you might want to split your users. Those in the US, you can have them within the US regions for AWS. Those within other parts of Europe, you can have them in the other parts of, within AWS, you have various regions. So you might want to split this. Now, whenever this need come up, you have to move those files. The developers have to come back and face that pain. So there's always a need for batch operation. Same thing has to do with storage specification. Over time, you might need to edit your storage classes and the ACLs. These are all needs for changes. Oops. So, why care about S3 batch operations? Remember I said, batch operations is not offering anything new. AWS invests a lot of money in making sure that developers can use their platform both through the console and through their APIs. They've got REST APIs, they've got SDKs, they've got a lot of things to make sure that developers can always access their services. So batch operations is not offering anything new. Oops, I ran too fast. So there are other ways that you can access your files within AWS. You have the manual approach, like I had to do painfully. That's going to download your files to your local system and re-uploading them. Or for the nerdy people, we have the option to write scripts or programs to execute operations. Quite a shame that Dan has gone. I wanted to throw some puns at him, but he's gone. People like this, who instead of spending 10 minutes to do their tasks, they rather write a shell script to do it, spend 10 hours. When the project manager asks, what are you doing? You're writing a script for it. But what's the challenge in doing that? It's possible though, nonetheless, it's possible. You can write a script to upload your files, like we tried doing. But there are challenges with it, and one of them is it's difficult to write. Not everyone is used to shell scripting. Not everyone is used to writing scripts to move or perform operations. And so it's also difficult to maintain and collaborate on. If you've got a team of 5 engineers and you have just one guy who knows how to write these scripts, all the load falls on him. He's the one who has to write those scripts, update them, maintain them, and all of those. So it's difficult for the rest to collaborate on. Then vital credentials are prone to security risk. Unlike other programming language or other scripting languages, there is not much support for protecting credentials within shell scripts because you have to pass your credentials in there to run the script. So there's a high chance of your sensitive credentials leaking out. Or when you're using third-party services, now you have to supply your AWS credentials to those services to perform uploads on your behalf. And then we have difficult to scale for large operations. So now we have organizations that have massive, massive amounts of data. They have hexabytes, petabytes, petabytes of data. That's massive. Organizations like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where we have users uploading millions of assets by the day. Not by the day, per second. You have them uploading thousands of millions of assets. And also it's difficult to monitor. So those who are used to writing scripts, you know that when you execute a script, you just have to pray it executes successfully. So you press the enter button, you take your hands off. Hopefully it completes. It's in the Lord's hand. So back to why using batch operations. And it's because it provides the best developer experience while performing large-scale operations. We'll see this in action when I begin a demo of it. But it helps developers to focus on the task at hand. Now, with batch operations, you no longer have to worry about writing those scripts yourself. You're literally putting all that work on AWS. AWS, go do this. I'm going to focus on just moving the files. Now you can focus on the task at hand, which is to move your files from one bucket to another bucket. And not just buckets, it also supports moving from one account to the other. So you can have a totally new account. You could move your file from one account to a new one. It's not tied to AWS at all. And it's also the safest way to perform large-scale operations. I mean, what's better than using AWS for an AWS task? You are rest assured they won't leak your credentials. It's within AWS. Then you also have the IAM policies. IAM is a part of AWS that manages who can access what's within your AWS account. Then it provides out-of-the-box monitoring and tracking of large-scale operations. And this is something that I love a lot because one of the projects I worked on, we had an issue whereby someone would make an edit to a file and would be wondering who made this edit. There was no way to see that change that had been made. And this is something that AWS Batch Operation gives to you. So when you execute a batch job, it shows you who executed it, when it was executed, and the results of the execution. It's something that it provides out of the box. You don't have to configure it. You don't have to use another monitoring service for it. It's all there. And it's also integratable with other AWS services. Paul mentioned new features to S3 Batch Operations. Batch Operations has actually been available since 2019, but last year at reInvent, they released something that's very, very much useful, and that's the ability to filter your batch operations. So previously, if you were to run a batch operation, it will run on the entire file, the entire buckets. Sorry, I keep mixing it up. It would run on the entire objects within a single bucket. But now with the feature they released last year at reInvent, you can now filter things out. So you can filter based on the name, based on the suffix or the prefix. So when you're naming your files within a bucket, you can add certain suffixes. For example, if you're creating a file for your administrators, you can have admin dash the name. So that's a suffix. With those suffixes, you can now filter what it runs on. Now, if you were to think about this, if you were writing a bash script, your process would probably be to pull all the files down, run a loop that would loop through all those files again and re-upload them. They probably filter some out. That's an expensive operation. Those who write algorithms will probably tell you to avoid expensive loops. Just work on what you need. And that's what AWS provided last year at reInvent. Oops, this was supposed to be for the first one. Yeah, so integrating batch operations with other AWS services, and that's something that I love a lot, because now you can use batch operations with Lambda functions. Lambda functions on AWS is how we execute certain operations, totally serverless. You don't have to manage the servers. You just call the Lambda function when you need it. It performs the job, and you get it. Now, what this does is it gives you the ability to perform certain operations on your S3 objects. Now, with Lambda functions, you can do things like transcribe an existing video within your bucket. So imagine a scenario whereby you have your users upload videos. You want this to be very seamless. Now, you don't want to do the transcription immediately they upload the video. You want them to upload it, then probably later on, they would come back and see the transcription because you want it to be as fast as possible. Now, you could use batch operations at a specific time of the day to perform these transcriptions. So your batch operation would be calling Lambda function. The Lambda function would transcribe those videos and spit it out. Here are some potential ideas for Lambda functions, and one of them is scanning media for explicit content using recognition. Recognition is also a service within AWS that allows you to perform machine learning tasks on your files. You can resize media content. I have a demo on this where we upload files within a bucket and we use an external service to then resize those files to the smallest size as possible. For those who build applications, we always need to have those files very small because it affects the loading time. So when you open an application, if you have files that are too large, they take too much time to load. So this is something that everyone does in the application. Prerequisites for using batch operations are, first you need something called an inventory report. This is something on AWS, then you need the IAM policies because batch operations perform actions on your behalf. So the same way with AWS, if you're doing something that performs an operation on your behalf, you need to authorize it, and you perform the authorization through IAM policies, which you attach to the batch operations. So an inventory report contains crucial information about the contents of a bucket. What was that? Wow, I'm seeing double. With inventory reports, developers have the ability to generate reports daily. It's just like the literal meaning of the name, inventory report. If you're working in a farmhouse, you'd have like an inventory where you write everything within your farmhouse or your store, listing all the tools you have, your services, your products, and all of those. That's the same thing with inventory reports. It's basically a report that has everything within a specific bucket, the files, the metadata, when they were uploaded, and those sort of things. They are necessary for auditing reports and also management purposes. It's one of the things that batch operation requires because the batch operator needs to know what's in that bucket, what to move, the metadata for them. I shouldn't have come. Okay. Quite good. So I've got a demo. And there's a comma to the demo. I wasn't hoping to see that slide here. So in my demo, I want to show you how you can copy files from one bucket to another. Remember, I've mentioned it severally now, all about developer experience. If you want to move your files, it shouldn't take you a lot of time. Single clicks, like AWS calls it, or a single API request. And I've got two demos, actually. One is showing how to move files from one bucket to another, and one has to do with resizing files from one bucket and moving them to a totally new bucket. So now, we're not just moving files, we're adding another task to it. You now have to resize those files and move them. Now, here's the comma of my demo. I forgot to generate an inventory report. I forgot to mention again also. I keep forgetting things. Inventory reports are generated. I can move back. Yes, I can. So you can generate reports either daily, weekly, or monthly. But sadly, you cannot generate reports whenever you like. It has to be within a 24-hour span, or a 7-day span, or a full 31-day for monthly setting. So I forgot to generate the reports yesterday. I should have done that. Now I cannot perform the demo in real time. But I can still do a demo.
Yesterday's data.
Yeah, I can still do a demo, but the demo would show you how batch operation fails. That's part of a demo. A win is a win. A win is a win. So let me keep this. The Simpsons. Okay. I need to come out. Let's see. Good enough?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is the S3 console on AWS. If you're familiar with AWS, this is the S3 console. We've got batch operations, and I've got existing tasks all over here. If you were to create a new one, you'd have to create it through the button over here. This is possible. This is the recommended way to do it, but I don't like it for one reason. And that is it's because it's difficult to find the inventory reports through this way. You have to come here, browse S3. Now you have to look through all the buckets, looking for that specific inventory report. And that's why I don't like it. Imagine you had a big company where you had thousands of buckets or hundreds of buckets. It makes it difficult to find. But the way I love doing it is to go to the buckets. Yep. This bucket. Now to come over to the management console, straight down. So this is where you see all the inventory reports that has been generated. You can see the frequency, the last export. This was yesterday's export. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's yesterday. So now you can just generate the job directly from the export. You don't have to go searching for it. Why is it not showing up?
You said it was going to be broken, right?
No, not at this point. Not at this point. Not at this point.
It's a demo.
So now you can see the create job from manifest. Now we could just launch the job from here. It's as easy as that. It automatically selects the manifest file for you. You don't need to look for it yourself. It's already there. Creating. Now these are the operations you can perform with batch operations. You can either copy, you can invoke the Lambda function, you can replace object tags. There are a bunch of things you could do all from here. Like AWS calls it, within few clicks. No need to write shell scripts. You don't have to go through a rigorous process. For this first demo, I would be doing a copy. We've got a bunch of configurations here. We don't need this, we don't need this. But we need the read to see the data that's being moved. And we've got next. Oops. Oh, yep, sorry. The destination. So if you're moving from one point to the other point, you've got to configure where it's being moved up to. I'm going to use a second bucket. Choose it. Why are there so many confirmations? I know what I'm doing.
Are you sure?
I know what I'm doing.
AWS is terrible at UX. Let's just say it.
No, don't say that.
Yes,
Don't
yes.
say that. We've got a bunch of confirmations. Next. Oh yeah, so this is where we select the IAM role. Remember I mentioned the IAM role, which gives power to the batch operator to perform actions on your behalf. So that's the good thing about it. You're not performing these yourself, it's doing them for you. I have a role already. What is it? Oh yeah, this is the report now. I'm just gonna keep them here. Choose path. Next. Create. Now, the job has been created, but it's not executed. So it's also the beauty of batch operations. You can create a job, you could leave it there to a while, and come back to run it. You don't have to run it immediately. I think you're brewing up a question for me. I could see your movement.
But not yet.
Oh, I'll come back. So yeah, we have the job listed there. It's not run. You can see the status over here. It tells you if the job has been run or not. It's just there waiting for you to run it. So now I can click on the run job. Just ignore all of this. Come down here, run it. Now you've got confirmation. It's been run. You can go back to the list to view it. It's active now. Keep your eye on the status. It's completing. Still completing. By the way, I forgot to show. Within the buckets, we have about 14 images, I think, 14 or 7. Let's just check. So you can see what's been moved. We've got, there's 7 actually. These are not the files, these are reports, unnecessary stuff.
You compressing them or making a thumbnail? Are you changing the size?
No, that's the second demo. Just,
okay.
I'll come back.
Don't get ahead.
So I could show one of the files in it. That's not part of the demo. So now let's go back to the job we were running. I'm just going to refresh this so we can see. Hooray, it shows completed now. So the job was executed. But here's the bad part. Total failed 100%. I told you it was going to fail.
You had 7 objects and you've got 14.
Yeah.
No, so these are reports, basically. These are all reports from previous jobs that I've executed. They are not really files, so you can see these are the main files that I have in them. The PNG files that are photos, basically. So these are unnecessary folders.
They're not filtered out then. It's not
There's
like
another
starting.
7 files in those job folders.
There are actually more than 7. When you calculate the files in each folder, So if you were to open them, these are just reports, like your necessary metadata files. They are not pictures themselves.
Where's it getting the 14 from? We're confused by the...
So the 14, what's actually happening is it's compiling the total amount of every object within the bucket. Now it's counting everything all together. And this is actually another beautiful part of this. Like you asked, so if I were to recreate a new job again, just restart the process. Now you can see how it filters out those files, because these are not actual photos, so we don't want to move them. They are basically just metadata, so we can filter them out, all from the console. I've got the lights shining up there. Oh. So we can come to batch operations. Oh no, that's the unrecommended way by me. So I could go back to the bucket. Back to the management. Like you want to create a new job. Boop. Yep, that's all good. Same copy operation. Just do this. There is a filter field that allows you to filter out specific files. Next. Oh, the destination. Come on. Good. So read is part of the ACL configuration. If you want the file to be publicly accessible, you can select that. If it's a private file, you don't need to select it. It's just going to be there. Browse, skip this here. Choose path. Yep. Here we go. Just a few clicks. It's on the documentation.
Copy star.stars. Feeling quite simple by comparison.
But that could take us back to the picture we showed. Where you either spend 10 minutes or you spend 10 hours.
Automating it with Terraform,
No, that's overkill. That's overkill.
10 hours.
Aren't you copying them to your CNM folder rather than your original folder? Destination folder, I think you were copying them back where you started.
It's a bit difficult to see. Copy, destination. It's quite difficult. No, I'm not. I think I'm not. I didn't filter them out, actually. But I could still run them.
Is this a before and after resize?
No, so I haven't done the resize yet. I think you're quite interested in the resize.
Yeah, this is the batch. It says batch, but you haven't done the batch resize yet. No?
Okay, I'll move to the resize. But the beautiful part of it is the ability to copy files across those buckets. If I were to do this, I probably have to do this manually, download the images, and re-upload them. But through this, I could, within a few clicks, like we mentioned, just move the files. It's as easy as that. But sadly, it doesn't work because I didn't generate the inventory reports yesterday. So the thing is, the batch operator relies on that inventory report to see all the files that you have and copy them. So if you've got like an outdated inventory report, it won't work. It's also like a downside to it. So you have to make sure that the inventory report is generated before you can move your files.
Is it out of date because the files have gone somewhere else? I'm not quite sure why.
So just like a literal inventory report within a farmhouse, if you do not take those inventory reports, if someone else is to read the reports, they would believe you have certain things listed in the inventory.
So
now,
those files aren't there anymore?
Yeah, so the inventory report says they are not there because I uploaded them about 2 hours ago, but the inventory report says there are other files there. So it's like a mismatch. in between the files you have now.
So the 14 files, and the 14 files were in the inventory report yesterday, not the
Yeah.
7 files that are in the
Because
file.
I like changed, because that was my
That's where-
personal bucket.
Right.
So I deleted those files and put new ones in there. So the inventory report has not been generated. So that's the downside to the demo, but you can see how it works. And it also shows how it feels. So a win is a win. It works, but it doesn't move the files. So for the second demo, that's moving the files. I don't want to go too much in the code, but this is the Lambda function. Lambda function basically executes a piece of code when you need it to, based on your triggers and all of those. So what this does is the batch operator pushes the files into the Lambda functions, which we're doing here. We're getting the file, and we're using a service called tinypng. I should open that. Tiny.
Yes.
Interesting. No. Tiny PNG resize. Good thing I cleared my cache. So basically, if you're trying to resize a file on your computer, you make use of this. You drop the file in there. It reduces the image size. I can show a demo of this one, and it should work. Desktop. Let's see. Okay, that's just my iOS home screen. Open this. This one fails also. Why is everything failing today?
It's a demo.
The demo gods are angry. What should work? This should work. It's a PNG image.
Petabytes, you say.
Petabytes?
Petabytes.
No, that's not up to, that's just megabytes. So it's resizing it quite fast. So minus 73%, resized it down from 4 megabytes to just a single megabyte. So now imagine this was an actual application. Definitely a file that's 1 megabyte would load much, much faster than a file that's 4 megabytes. So this is something that most application developers do. They always have this process in place where they get to resize those images just to improve the user experience for everyone.
Be careful, John will want you to use AV1 in a second. So.
Everyone.
But that's job, man.
That's why you've been asking about it, really.
It'd take a long time.
I agree with you. So in this demonstration here, what I'm trying to do is to work with this service via the API. Now this is a third-party service being used with S3 objects here. So we're basically getting the file out. We're making use of the Tiny service. I don't know why it's called Tiny. It's quite weird.
Making it small.
Look, it's quite a good name. So basically, we resize it and we put it back into a new bucket over here. That's the last operation. If you're not really good at writing code, just take it that way. Yeah. So this function has been deployed to AWS, and now we can, I'll show you how to drive it using batch operations. So just the same way we did the other ones, you can go back to the bucket. It's quite difficult to see. Oops. Back to the management, your inventory report. Actually, the inventory report is the key thing for the batch operations. Without it, you can't use batch operations. And annoyingly, it takes about 14 hours to generate the first inventory report. But then I think it's like a bug that turned out to be a feature within AWS because it works like the name
Surprise.
inventory reports, taking an inventory. You don't take inventories every time, you take it as an interval.
So you couldn't use this on a hot folder. You couldn't create a hot folder using batch.
Yeah, you could do that.
But you have to wait for an inventory cycle to come along with
Yeah.
it. Okay.
You have to wait for the inventory report.
So I can't just chuck stuff in there and poof, off it goes.
No. You have to generate the inventory report. like I said, it's like a bug that's also a feature, depending on how you look at it.
More like a bug.
So we create a new job, but this time it's gonna be, it's not gonna be a copy job. It's gonna be an invoke Lambda function job, where we get to select the Lambda function. I've created one previously, called it S3 Batch Operations function compressor. Quite a long name. This, next. Like the first one, it's gonna fail also, but it's still worth. Just select this one. Here we go. Oh yeah, I also have to configure the report destination. Oop. And next. This one is much easier to create because everything is in the Lambda function. Just gonna create the job. Some amount of objects, and I can come back here to run it. Let's go. Get ready. It's gonna fail also. Don't get your hopes too high.
So this depends on the Lambda function knowing which bucket to send the data to.
Yeah.
Not
So
you telling the batch operation where to.
yeah. So in this scenario, AWS basically gives you the power to move your files the way you want it to do. So like we have here, we're not just moving the files, we're resizing them. So now we have an additional operation being attached to the entire workflow. So you could also use this for whatever service you want to do. It gives you that operation. It gives you that full autonomy over your file. Completed. We've got 100% fail rate. Quite good.
Success. Yeah, victory.
Completed, but failed. Yeah. But now in this scenario, we can take a more deeper look into it. We can now take a look at the logs. If you are using a bash script for this, you literally not have much insight as to why your bash script is failing. You'd only see like an error response and all of that. But now we can come back to the main Lambda console. Boop. Come back to the function. Now taking a look at the monitor, that would give you more insight to it via CloudWatch. Boop. Yeah, this should be, what's the time? 2050. Yeah, so 2049 should be the most recent one. I think this is still coming up. Why?
It failed.
No, so I was trying to pull out the reason why it's failed. That should come up within the Lambda function log. So it gives you more insight into what you're doing. You can see at what point it's failing, why it's failing.
But the batch will have called the Lambda function for each file.
Yeah.
So we weren't got to the Lambda function
Yeah.
because we didn't have an inventory report to call the Lambda function on.
So it would call it on based on the previous file within the inventory reports, based on your old files. So it's still the same issue because the inventory report is outdated. I think I should have had like a pros and cons for batch operations and mentioned that also in there.
How's pricing work? I should know that. I don't use batch.
Sadly, it doesn't show up here. It should show up.
Pricing.
What?
Sorry, never mind.
I'm gonna have the questions because I'm gonna have a lot of questions on.
Yeah.
This thing come up. But the good part of the demos is we had the functions run, showed you how to use the batch operations, and I also showed you how it fails. So that's part of the demo.
Well-rounded.
Hopefully next time I'll show you how it passes. So back to my talk slide. Ooh, my knees are. It's quite a good punishment.
Demo time.
No gym today. Okay. Summary of my talk and the demo in between. Batch operations improve the developer experience. Sadly, I couldn't show you how it improves it today. But if you try it at home, you would see the improvement. Or you could try the former step of manually moving your files one by one and then use batch operations. You'd appreciate it more. And the second one, Lambda functions with batch operations gives you superpowers, basically. I showed you how to use an external service that's outside AWS to transform your files, basically. Even though it didn't work, it would have worked if I had a good inventory report. And I don't have a slide here, but imaginary slide. The cons of batch operations. It relies on the inventory report. So if you have a scenario whereby you need to move files on the fly without planning for it, it might not be the best for you because your inventory report might not have been updated, like the case we're having now. So depends on your need. If you have a scenario whereby you want to move your files, you might need to plan properly for it. Like let's say you want to move it today, you have to make sure your inventory report is updated before you move those files. That's the con. I don't have the slides here. I'll add it later. So imaginary slide, that's the con of using batch operations. But aside from that, it's a pretty decent one. If you have ever worked in a place where you have to move files, you would understand the pain that's associated with it. Or one way to even think about it is having to move files from your phone to a new phone. It's a real pain. So, thank you for listening to my talk about batch operations. Hopefully the next time I speak, the demo would work. So, that's it. I've got a couple of references here. So I wrote this some weeks back. And by the way, this works. So if you read through the article, it worked in there. But it's not a live demonstration. It's a very short piece, actually. And I showed you. Actually, I should open it. I could show you.
Homework?
What?
Are we getting homework?
You could take it like that. It's a good homework. But basically, I just want to show the status there for him. So you can see that it works. Here we go. And this is more detailed, so you can follow this step by step if you're wondering how to use it at home. A good homework also. Yeah, so you can see here, we've got a 0 to 2 failed rate, and we've got a 100% complete rate. So it worked in there, but it didn't work in my demo. Just disregard the demo, use this one. So back to, oh my God. Oh no. We should have a podium here. But back to my talk. And we've got a bunch of references and use cases for batch operations. If you're wondering how large organizations like Capital One and a bunch of them are using this feature, AWS has a couple of use cases there that you could read through and see how they make use of it. I think Capital One has a very good, they gave a lot of insights of how they moved an entire folder that was about a petabyte large from one region to another region. So imagine the scale of data that was moved using this. Imagine having to move a petabyte. I think after we've got megabytes, we've got gigabytes, and we've got petabytes. I think, am I correct? Terabytes, yeah. So terabytes, and we've got petabytes of data. So imagine how large the data is that they had to move. So that was at a very large scale, which is actually what it's built for. And questions?
More a thought than a question. I'm assuming that this is great for moving assets out of Amazon because I can run it against my bucket, wrap my assets up and egress them in my Lambda function to somewhere else. Yeah. Not very good for bringing assets in from somewhere I don't have an inventory report.
No, so it's designed to move within Amazon and also outside Amazon. Like you mentioned, using the Lambda function. So the Lambda function unlocks what you can do with your file because each Lambda function is run over the specific file. So you could write some custom code to move it to a different place.
If I wanted to import a ton of stuff from somewhere else, it doesn't help me because I haven't got the inventory to do that with.
So in that scenario, using just a Lambda function would work, but not using it through batch operations.
Cool.
Can you predict before you press that run job whether you're going to egress £1 million worth of stuff, or how much compute you're going to use by pressing that button? Because that would be, I know you've got the protections elsewhere, but can you say that's going to cost me this much?
In terms of the size of data being moved in or moved out?
Just the cost of the operation you're about to undertake.
Oh, actually, you've got the pricing calculator on AWS. So before you use any AWS service, they've got a pricing calculator that you could try to sort of estimate the cost of how much it would cost you. I know
for a specific task, though, it would be amazing.
To have it live.
You know, like I'm about to do this bucket, so it will cost me this much money.
Actually,
Between S3.
I know you can't do it now because you have to know the bucket size and then run it through the calculator.
So-
but in future, that would be amazing.
they've got a pricing which I should have mentioned that. So it costs 25 cents to run a single job. Within this demo, I ran about a couple of jobs.
So I did a job recently where we had to move about 2 petabytes of data from
Yeah.
AWS.
Yeah.
I'm not on the microphone, thanks. And yeah, we had no idea how much it was going to cost beforehand, like the egress, because it was like a static, it was a dynamic thing. People were putting things into it and people moved things out. Like to have, if you've got like a big bucket, like if a big company has a big bucket, but or lots, it'd be nice to be able to sort of have an idea of a pricing without having someone to go to the calculator and
Configurators.
So sadly, that feature does not exist. But based on the price that they give, so they give like an umbrella price. So if you're moving about 1 million objects, it costs you $1. So now you could use based on that to estimate your own cost. So if you have like $1 for 1 million objects, you can calculate that by the petabytes of data that you're moving around. Or you could just use the pricing calculator to give you a specific quote.
Victory, thank you so much. That was such a
Thank you.
fascinating talk. I think real world applications all over the place with that.
I haven't given a talk since last year. No, sorry, since the previous COVID period. So this is my first talk in about 4 years now. Yeah, so it was pretty nice. Amazing audience. I'll definitely come back for the next meetup. Like and subscribe for next one.